Welcome to How You Livin', a transformative podcast featuring best-selling author, inspirational speaker, and minister, Dr. Rick Rigsby. And now, Dr. Rick.
Hello, friends. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to discuss developing our brain power. There's a saying the old folks used to repeat. It went something like this: if you don't use it, you'll lose it. In other words, if you don't use your brain, your mental abilities will decline. To this very day, my in-laws in their 80s and 90s, they talk every day, they reminisce, they watch the news and discuss current events. They work on puzzles together, giant size, of course, and they watch Jeopardy nightly. They're using their brains. Well, guess what? Research and science is finally catching up to the wisdom of our parents and grandparents. Like other muscles in our body, if we don't use our brain, we'll eventually lose functioning. My wife, as an example, calls her elderly mom every single day. Desi is in her 80s and is still in her right mind. But sometimes she forgets things, which is typical for this age. In an effort to strengthen her memory, my wife calls her mom daily with memory drills, from facts they've reviewed during the previous phone call to citing the names of all the grand and great-grandchildren. To my wife's joy and to her mother's amazement, mom's memory is improving. While experts debate exactly how much of our brains we use, some say 10%, many say 50%, many say 100%. That debate rages on. But experts do agree that most of us only use a small fraction of our total brain power. I remember being required to take statistics in graduate school. I'm not a fan of multivariate regression analysis. And at the time, back in the 1980s, I wasn't a huge fan of our professor who, for an entire quarter, banned the use of software, which would have assisted us greatly with completing our calculations quickly and without much thinking. Our professor insisted that we take our time with a pencil, that we go slow, that we not avoid the hard work. Think about that. Going slow, not avoiding the hard. Two components that are missing in our culture today, thanks to an unbalanced approach to technology, according to Dr. Tim Elmore and his work on the inverse relationship of technology. Today, I'm so grateful for what that statistics professor was doing, teaching us to grow our brain power by proceeding step by step to solve complex statistical problems. Brain power fuels cognitive functions such as retention, memory, and focus. With all the distractions in our world, we cannot afford to increase our brain power every single day. Here's a reminder. Business consultant Robin Sharma once stated that the average person is distracted 2 hours every single day, interrupted every 11 minutes, then it takes 30 minutes to return to a deep level of thinking. I remember telling my college students that they didn't have to accept the fact that the average attention span of the average adult is 15 seconds. Well, friends, that was 2 decades ago when I was still teaching. Today, the average attention span of the average adult, 8 seconds. And according to author Sarah LeBeau, the attention span drops significantly for younger people. Are you ready for this one? Gen Z, those young people typically born between 1995 and 2010, have an attention span of 1 second. Oh, by the way, LeBeau said clever marketing campaigns that target Gen Z are taking advantage of their slight attention span. Savvy advertisers aware that young folks make snap judgments have learned to earn their attention quickly. Gen Z instantly determines what they're interested in. Then they skip and scroll past content that doesn't intrigue. Welcome to the age of the 1 second ad. I remember my father used to cautiously warn me that we Americans tend to get more and more complacent with each generation of innovation. He would tell us how reading was significantly impacted by radio, or how modern machinery had reduced the desire for hard work. I'm not sure what my dad would think today were he alive, for you see, we have everything from automatic trash can grabbers to, well, the GPS. If my dad knew that I needed a phone, voice activated phone, to direct me from one point to the other, he questioned my sanity. In his day, you had to figure it out. Now scientists are telling us that processes of navigation, well, they're excellent therapy for the brain. I remember our summer vacations to see family. My mom was from Oklahoma, so we'd pack the Rambler station wagon and head to the Sooner State. After Oklahoma, we'd drive south to Texas to see my dad's side of the family, and then we'd eventually head back home to the San Francisco Bay Area. So let me break down our trip. Every year, we went from the Bay Area to Tulsa, that's 1,700 miles. Then Tulsa to Huntsville, Texas, that's 500 miles. Then Huntsville back to Northern California, that's 1,900 miles. We did this every single summer until I went away to college. And I loved it because I was my dad's navigator. I was the map man. And I loved the fact that my dad had faith in me to accurately read the map and calculate distances. In later years, he would laughingly confess that I was the only one who would stay up all night talking, and that my talking kept him awake. And that's the reason I was picked. Regardless of the reason, I love being my dad's navigator. The role introduced me to the world of maps and began a fascination with geography that I have to this very day. I can still remember my duties, reading the maps to keep us headed in the right direction, calling out the towns for my dad, came from Kingman, Arizona to Tucumcari, New Mexico. Looking at the stars, my dad was a merchant seaman, so he always loved to look at the stars and he would try to navigate. Calculating distances for stops. I would call out mileage signs and speed zones. I remember this duty, finding minor league or major league baseball games on the AM radio. Back then, no FM, no 8-track, no cassette or CD player, just AM radio. Keep in mind, we're talking about the 1960s and the early 70s. No internet, no GPS, no dashboard compass, nothing to warn of detours or impending traffic, nothing to illustrate where the next gas station would be or where the next rest stop was. These are important things when it comes to filling up or using the restroom. Without realizing it, I was increasing brain function in the following areas: math, astronomy, geography, logic, problem solving. I was even strengthening my vocal presentation by reporting the news, weather, and sports on the hour, every hour. Today, some 50 years later, helping my dad navigate through the night, those memories of talking all night with him, all day with him, in thunderstorms, going through floods, or whenever we got lost, those are among my fondest memories. No wonder a recent story about navigation captured my attention. This podcast was inspired by a recent television news story. Yes, I'm a dinosaur. I still watch the evening news. Blame it on my years in the business. Anyway, my dad, or any other World War II era adult, could have seen this story coming a mile away, no pun intended. The story focused on experts who claim that using the GPS weakens the brain. New research from McMaster University in Canada has found that using GPS too much weakens our cognitive functions. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, the NeuroFit lab director at McMaster University, argues that the GPS takes all the thinking out of the equation, takes all of the skill out of the equation. By turning off the GPS and using maps, for example, we train the brain. Thus, the brain becomes less likely to decline. And relying on a map rather than a machine can make a huge difference in the aging of our brains. Dr. Hayes says one of the first symptoms associated with dementia is a loss of our ability to get from point A to point B. Orienteering. Have you heard of it? It's simply figuring out how to get somewhere by using a map and a compass. While orienteering is getting from point A to point B, you decide on the travel mode. Some folks like to drive. Others prefer hiking, but you use your brain. You not only get great exercise, you stimulate your brain at the same time. Scientists quoted in the news story noted that losing navigational skills can lead to cognitive decline. Reading a map. Are you ready for this? Reading a map stimulates the hippocampus part of the brain. That part of the brain, the hippocampus, is responsible for memory, navigation, and mental mapping. It's a therapy designed to help our brains, and it's designed to keep our brains healthy. This could be a real turning point for many of us. So why not ask yourself today, what little things can I do to stimulate brain power? Why not consider driving somewhere in your town, a place where you normally would go and use your GPS for navigation, but today, leave your GPS on silent. It's a very small step, may even delay you a few minutes from reaching your destination. But just for a moment, just imagine what getting lost and forcing yourself to figure out will do to stimulate your brain. Just think about that for a little bit. I'm seeing your brain power increase this very moment. That's going to do it for this episode. Until we meet again, this is Dr. Rick, asking the most important question I can ask. How you living?
Are you ready to make an impact in your world right now? Do you want to stop existing and start living your best life right now? Dr. Rick wants to give you the first chapter of his best-selling book, Lessons from a Third Grade Dropout, absolutely free. Just go to www.rickrigsby.com/free gift to get the print or audiobook right now.
This is the podcastfactory.com.